No, you're not dreaming. It's absolutely real. Legendary carmaker Ford is coming back to F1 after striking a hot new deal to partner with Red Bull for the latest era of Formula One. This new era would be predominated by the latest engine rules, making it a lot more difficult for teams to find success in the races. This new deal came to reality after Red Bull had discussions with Porsche and Honda and finally announced a killer new collaboration with Ford. This means Red Bull Racing and AlphaTauri would now use Ford-branded engines from 2026 till as far as 2030. This new partnership will be based out of the new Red Bull Powertrains facility that's been under construction for the past 2 years. Ford made the claim that it will have a big role in the hybrid part of the engines in particular. It's pretty exciting that Ford is coming back to Formula One after nearly 2 decades. Their return is a pretty big deal for Formula One and the new rules, but why are they doing it now? Another question also comes up. How would they make it work, and in what way would their return change Formula One racing? In this video, we'll attempt to answer these questions. The red carpet was rolled out for this monumental announcement of Ford's comeback as Red Bull's engine partner in 2026, but it has raised some murmurs among the key figures in Formula One. This is in contrast to the somewhat cooler reaction that Andretti received when it announced its tie-up with General Motors last month. So why is everyone angry about this matchup? Well, it has something to do with the fact that some quarters of the Formula One view this engine deal as a glorified sponsorship masked as a supply deal. Allow us to explain. To these people, there is no real investment or technological input from Ford, and therefore it's not a real manufacturer project. Some of the fans were also quick to point out that this is quite similar to how General Motors' support of a prospective Andretti Cadillac team has been viewed. So is this a show of hypocrisy? To answer that, let us first better understand the type of deal Ford has done and why. Before now, Ford already had discussions with existing and prospective teams about a F1 partnership. In fact, Ford even considered entering into F1 as a manufacturer, but to the company nothing felt right until the option of the Red Bull arrangement emerged. This shining new strategic partnership between Ford and Red Bull will bring the US manufacturer back into the big leagues for the first time since 2004. During recent years, Ford has been motivated to find a way back into the F1 grid due to the sport's almost feverish popularity in the United States. The company has also been entering into the electrification sector and has been looking into electrifying some of its engines. This process started over 2 years ago, and they have been working out what exactly to do to make their comeback one to remember. Ford did the research pretty well. They studied a number of options for the return, but in the end, they decided they wanted it to be a purely strategic move. To make it simpler, they just wanted to enter F1 as cheaply as possible. We can't blame them for that though, can we? So first, they ruled out creating their own works team, and next, they ruled out buying into an existing team or taking over one completely, like Audi is going to do with Sauber. In the end, it was only when Red Bull talks began in the second half of last year that they settled on a clear preference. This was the perfect deal. They realized it presented a unique opportunity. Why? Well, because Honda quitting F1 meant that Red Bull was the only non-automotive company preparing for the 2026 rules. In essence, they had no way to build their own engine. This gap gave Ford the chance to partner with them, since Red Bull already has the structure to build an F1 engine, and as a bonus, they're not a rival manufacturer in the road car world. Red Bull's powertrains would be the core of the project, and Ford is mainly going to have technical input on the electrical elements of the engine. It's fair to say that this is not going to be strictly a Ford re-entry into F1. It's definitely not going to be as high-powered as when Ford owned its own team or when they worked with Cosworth as an engine supplier. Nevertheless, it seems some folks are perfectly happy with this arrangement. What others think is that Ford is merely trying to find the cheapest way back into F1. They're essentially just going to pay for the privilege of calling itself an engine supplier while dressing it up as something more than it is. In essence, they want the publicity without the investment. This is the same problem fans have against the recently announced Andretti and General Motors partnership, which we made a video on. It definitely represents a good way for Ford to get the most value out of their money, as it requires less commitment than starting out afresh with a new works team. It even pays Ford more than building its own engine from scratch. The whole idea is to make a name for themselves while doing very little. Isn't that just genius? Ford is not entering into F1 in 2026 the same way Audi is doing, but they're still being welcomed with a lot of fanfare. There really is nothing wrong with that, especially if it's kind of a middle ground between a full operation and a sponsorship. Ford will be responsible for financing some parts of the project, but there is also a real chance that they will be involved with the battery and energy recovery systems of the new engine. Their involvement will go much farther than just paying to slap a sticker on the surface of a car. There really is no single way that a manufacturer can enter the F1, and we think the geniuses at Ford have figured out a truly cost-effective way to participate in one of the greatest sports on the planet. There's a lot of wiggle room, which is weird given the usual strictness of the FIA. I mean, look at how calm F1 was about Alfa Romeo paying Sauber for naming rights in a deal that allows Alfa to claim a Formula 1 team that it really has absolutely nothing to do with. I mean, think about it. Alfa Romeo is basically just paying Sauber to do all the work for them. It's unavoidable that this incident has triggered questions about why Andretti's deal is not good enough to go through the top brasses. All you need to really know here is that Andretti is having a tough time facing serious opposition despite complying with everything they were asked to do. They went out and found a manufacturer to partner with, but it still wasn't enough. One of the main arguments against the deal is that there could potentially be some foul play going on behind the scenes. General Motors might simply be allowing Andretti to use its name to enter into F1 as a works team with manufacturer backing, while General Motors would reap all the benefits of having an F1 team with as little input as possible. You can probably see the hypocrisy here. If F1 bosses don't like Andretti and Cadillac getting into Formula 1 because they doubt it would be a bona fide General Motors works team, then why does everyone welcome Ford with open arms? Aren't they doing the same thing? Ford is making the same half-hearted manufacturer commitment as General Motors. If the FIA and F1 are really ready to expand the grid for the right team or teams, then in theory, Ford's program should be a positive sign that a manufacturer doesn't really have to own a majority stake in a team. Even better, a manufacturer does not have to make a huge investment to be considered as a serious prospect. Andretti and General Motors may have found some middle ground with their plan, but there are a couple of key differences that outline the real problems facing Andretti and General Motors. The key difference between what General Motors is trying to help the Andretti team achieve and how Ford is getting back into F1 is that Ford is backing an existing member of the grid. Ford's re-entry into F1 will not involve the addition of any extra team. Remember, if there's one thing F1 bosses hate, it's losing money. An additional team entering F1 would mean dilution of the prize money and TV exposure for the existing teams. It should be well understood by now that this is one of the major concerns over letting Andretti and Cadillac be the 11th team. This resistance comes even after the FIA has opened an official route for new teams to join F1. People really hate to lose their money. It's that simple. So this is why the re-entry of Ford is causing a lot of controversy. It's also why they can be welcomed back with open arms, but Andretti and Cadillac still have a mountain to face. Another reason why it's a lot smoother for Ford is that they've been in Formula 1 before. Red Bull and Ford have had a very connected history. It was the Ford-owned Jaguar team that Red Bull bought to create the monster that is now dominating Formula 1. Perhaps General Motors would have better luck if it found a team in Formula 1 that's willing to accommodate them. Maybe even then they might be welcomed with open arms. For now, the Formula 1 world would rather celebrate the anticipated return of Ford. What do you think about this sticky situation? Whose side are you on? Let us know where you stand in the comments. I'd definitely love to hear what you folks think about this one. Till next time.